There is a mysterious rest that man has long overlooked. You have struggled, toiled, and pushed against the circumstances of life, yet the key is not in struggle, but in stillness. For when you cease your striving and simply abide in the end of your desire, all things fall into place without effort. Tonight, I will show you how to do nothing, and yet allow everything to be accomplished. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Few words in Scripture are as charged with power as these. They were spoken in a moment when everything seemed lost, when the sea stretched before a people, and an army of destruction pressed hard behind them. From every outward angle, it was the end. Yet the command was not to lift a sword, nor to devise an escape, nor to wrestle with circumstance. The command was stillness. Stillness does not mean passivity, nor does it mean surrender to defeat. Stillness is the recognition that there is a greater power within you than all the appearances arrayed against you. To stand still is to anchor yourself in that awareness, refusing to be swept away by fear. It is to know, in the face of every contradiction, that salvation is already assured. And what is salvation but the unveiling of the fulfilled desire? When you read those words, you may imagine they belong to an ancient time and a distant people. But Scripture is not a record of past events. It is a present revelation of eternal truth. The Red Sea is every obstacle that seems impassable in your own life. The pursuing army is every fear, every pressing demand, every creditor, every voice that insists you will not succeed. And the command spoken then is spoken now: stand still. In your daily life, how often do you rush to act when pressed by fear? You receive a bill, and instantly you think, how shall I pay this? You meet resistance in work or relationship, and immediately you plot, argue, or plead. Yet the very energy of such striving reveals that you do not yet know the truth. For if you truly knew that your desire is already accomplished, would you scramble, or would you rest? Faith is never frantic. It does not sweat nor tremble. It stands. I once spoke with a woman who was desperate for a change in her life. She had labored long under financial strain and emotional turmoil. Each day she arose with the determination to do something about it. But the more she did, the more entangled her affairs became. I told her, your doing is not the answer. Your stillness is the answer. Stand in the inner conviction that your life is already transformed, and the outer picture will shift to reflect it. She thought this counsel strange at first, for she was accustomed to equating effort with results. But she yielded and began each night to still herself, picturing the life she desired as though it were already her reality. Within months, new opportunities emerged that she had never considered. Her debts were lifted, and the turmoil of her soul gave way to peace. Be still and know that I am God. This verse carries the same eternal rhythm. Stillness is the door to knowing. When you silence the frantic noise of fear, you discover the presence that declares, I am your sufficiency, I am your supply, I am your victory. That presence is not a distant deity, but the reality of your own consciousness, for it is within the awareness of I am that all things are called forth. You must grasp this salvation does not come by the might of your hand, nor the cunning of your mind, but by resting in the knowledge of the unseen already accomplished. When you stand still inwardly, you declare that the end is certain. You cease to wage war with appearances, and in that moment appearances begin to dissolve. Consider the parable of the 3 Hebrew boys in the furnace. The decree had gone forth that all must bow to the image of the king, yet they refused. They were cast into fire heated 7 times hotter than before. By every outward sign, this was the end. But their stillness of faith, their refusal to bow to fear, became their salvation. When the king looked into the flames, he saw not 3, but 4 walking unharmed. The fire had no power over them, because they would not be moved inwardly. This is your story. When the fires of life seem heated against you, your task is not to bow to them, nor to scheme 1,000 means of escape, but to stand still in the awareness that the victory is already yours. That which appears to destroy will be the very means by which your freedom is revealed. There is a vast difference between waiting in fear and standing in stillness. To wait in fear is to anxiously hope that circumstances might change, yet secretly believe they will not. To stand in stillness is to know they are already changed and to rest in that certainty. Take, for example, the man who desired healing of his body. For years he sought remedy through physicians, through treatments, through constant worry over what might happen next. Each day was a battlefield of effort, but when he was told to cease striving and to rest in the assurance of wholeness, he began to imagine, in the quiet of night, that he was already restored. He would lie still upon his bed, breathing quietly, and in that stillness he felt the ease of a healthy body, the delight of walking freely, the joy of friends remarking, "How well you look." He ceased every struggle to bring it about. In a short season, health broke forth like the dawn. Do you see the pattern? It is always the same standstill. The trouble with many is that they cannot believe such simplicity holds the power. They think, surely I must act, I must scheme, I must struggle. Yet Scripture reveals again and again that victory belongs not to the one who fights, but to the one who stands. Why shall not need to fight in this battle? Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you. This was the command spoken to Judah when armies came against them. And as they sang praises, standing still, the enemies destroyed themselves. What is this telling you? It is saying that your inner song of thanksgiving, your stillness of faith, does more to dissolve problems than 1,000 anxious actions. Life mirrors the state of your consciousness, not the multitude of your labors. When you rest in the end, life arranges the means. I remember once being pressed for provision myself when outward means seemed entirely shut. Yet I knew the command, stand still. Each night I quietly entered the vision of abundance as though it were already mine. I heard the voices of gratitude, felt the freedom of supply, and then I rested. Without strain, provision came in a way I could never have devised. A forgotten debt repaid, opportunities opening as if by invisible hand. Had I spent that time in worry or in frantic action, I would only have delayed the blessing. The greatest enemy of faith is the restless mind that insists, I must do something now. But true doing is inner being. To stand still is to become inwardly what you would outwardly express. Once that inner assumption is fixed, the outer must conform. Do not think this means you will never act in the outer world. Action will arise, but it will not arise from fear. It will spring forth naturally, effortlessly, as the outpicturing of the state you already accepted. Standing still does not paralyze you, it aligns you. It allows your steps to be ordered by an unseen wisdom greater than your own. Let me tell you of a merchant who once faced ruin. He had labored day and night, trying every device to save his business, but nothing availed. At last, exhausted, he chose to surrender his struggle. That night, he entered the quiet vision of his store filled with customers, of his accounts balanced, of his life prosperous. Night after night, he stood in that inner stillness. Soon, a new partnership presented itself, unexpected but perfect, and his affairs were turned around. He later said, "When I stopped running, everything began to move." This is the paradox of truth. You are told, be still and know. The knowledge comes not in the frenzy of seeking, but in the quietude of resting. When you stop resisting, the river of life carries you where you must go. Every scripture is written to awaken you to this principle. The walls of Jericho fell not by battering rams, but by marching in silence and lifting a shout of faith. Gideon's army triumphed not by numbers, but by trust. The widow's oil multiplied not by her calculation, but by her obedience to fill empty vessels. In each case, it was not the restless effort of man, but the stillness of reliance upon the unseen that wrought the miracle. You may ask, how do I stand still when my senses scream against me? How do I rest when the sea is before me and the army is behind? The answer is in turning from appearances to vision. You must choose in that moment to see the world as already redeemed. You must quiet the inner storm by fastening upon the end you desire, until that end feels more real than the facts before you. This is not easy at first, but with practice, the stillness becomes your dwelling place. It is like a child who, knowing his father's promise, does not fret. If told he will receive a gift, he goes about his play with joy, never doubting that it will come. In the same way, when you have accepted the unseen as done, you can go about your affairs with peace. The world may shout, "It is not yet," but you know, it is finished. When Scripture says, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord," it does not mean a salvation yet to be achieved. It means a salvation already accomplished, waiting only to be unveiled. Your part is to cease your interference, to rest in the faith that the end is secure. Then, like the parting of the sea, the way will open before you. And so, every time you face an obstacle, remember these words: stand still. Not with passive indifference, but with active faith. Stand still and feel within you the certainty of the accomplished desire. Stand still and allow the unseen to reveal itself in form. Stand still, for in stillness you behold salvation. The law that governs all manifestation is not written in the pages of human legislation, nor carved upon stone, but inscribed upon the living tablets of consciousness. It is simple, eternal, and sure. What you inwardly assume with feeling, you will outwardly express in fact. The inner precedes the outer. The unseen is the womb of the seen. To understand this law is to possess the key to every door, for you will discover that nothing comes to you by chance. Every event, circumstance, or relationship is but the harvest of seeds sown in an imagination. You must learn that desire is never random. Desire is the stirring of life within you, calling you to a greater expression. When you long for abundance, it is because abundance is seeking birth in your experience. When you yearn for companionship, it is because love has already taken root within. The desire is the call, and assumption is your answer. To assume is to accept the desire as already fulfilled, to feel the truth of it in the silence of your heart. And once assumed, the desire clothed in your consciousness will inevitably appear in your world. Think of a seed placed in the earth. The seed contains the pattern of the tree, the flower, or the fruit. You do not question whether it holds within it the life it promises. You accept it without doubt. Yet when desire stirs within you, you often treat it as if it were uncertain, as though life might betray its own impulse. But the law is as faithful within you as it is in nature. Just as surely as the seed of wheat bears wheat and not barley, the seed of wealth, health, or love within you must bear its kind if you but clothe it in assumption. There was a man who once came to me in despair, convinced that his life had reached its limit. His business was failing, his home unsettled, and his body weakened by strain. He said, "I cannot see a way forward." I asked him, "Can you imagine yourself as you would be if all were already well?" He hesitated, for his mind clung to the evidence of failure. Yet slowly, he began to paint the picture: his business thriving, his household harmonious, his body renewed. I told him, "Do not labor with the means. Simply assume the end and rest in it." He began to practice this nightly before sleep. Within months, unforeseen contracts restored his business, his home grew peaceful, and his health was renewed. His effort was not to change the outer world, but to accept inwardly a new state of being. The law does not fail. What fails is man's willingness to persist in assumption until the unseen hardens into fact. For many, the habit is to assume lack, to dwell in complaint, to clothe themselves in fear. And the law, impartial and unfailing, brings forth exactly what is sound. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. not as he wishes, not as he pleads, but as he assumes. Understand, then, the creative power of consciousness. The world you call real is but a shadow cast by your inner state. When you live in the state of abundance, abundance must surround you. When you dwell in the state of love, love must manifest. When you abide in the state of failure, failure must continue. The state you occupy inwardly writes the script of your life. Let me tell you of a woman who longed for companionship. She had spent years lamenting her loneliness, and each day she confirmed it by saying, "There is no one for me." She assumed the state of lack, and the world mirrored her faithfully. When she learned the law, she was asked to imagine herself as already loved, already cherished. She began each night to drift into sleep with the feeling of a wedding band upon her finger, with the sense of being embraced by one who adored her. She persisted, not allowing the outer loneliness to shake her inner vision. In a short time, circumstances moved in unexpected ways, and she met the very one who became her companion. She did not bring this about by chasing or striving, but by assumption. You may say, but how can assumption produce facts? Is this not mere fancy? Let us examine. Have you not noticed that your mood colors your experience? When you rise in joy, the day seems bright, and others respond with kindness. When you rise in gloom, the world appears harsh, and even neutral events seem burdensome. What is this but proof that your inner state shapes your outer perception? Extend this principle further, and you will see that the law is universal. That which you assume you inevitably experience. Consider also the artist. Before the canvas bears any image, the picture is already complete in his mind. The outer act of painting is but the expression of the inner vision. So too with your life. The vision you hold inwardly is the sketch. The world is but the canvas. To insist on change in the outer without first changing the inner is like scrubbing the canvas while leaving the vision untouched. The law demands faithfulness, but it rewards without measure. If you would change your life, change your assumption. If you would receive wealth, cease saying, "I am poor." If you would receive health, cease rehearsing sickness. If you would receive love, cease repeating loneliness. Instead, assume the end. Speak within yourself, "I am wealthy," and feel the ease of plenty. Whisper inwardly, "I am strong," and feel the vitality coursing through you. Declare, "I am beloved," and rest in the joy of affection. The law cannot distinguish between reality and assumption. It simply reflects what you clothe yourself in. There is a story told of a farmer whose land lay barren. Year after year he lamented the soil, saying, "It will yield nothing." His neighbor, by contrast, praised his own ground, declaring, "It is fertile, it is fruitful." Both sowed seed, but the one who despised his land received a meager crop, while the other reaped abundantly. The soil did not judge, it simply returned what was sown. So it is with consciousness. The soil of the world responds to the seed of your assumption. Sow lack, reap lack. Sow abundance, reap abundance. This law is hinted in the words, "To him that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath." Does this not seem unjust at first? Yet it is simply the outworking of assumption. He that hath, the one who assumes possession, receives more, for his consciousness draws it forth. He that hath not, the one who assumes lack, finds even the little taken, for his consciousness repels supply. The law is impartial. It is man's assumption that determines his portion. You may remember a time when you dreaded a meeting, expecting harsh words. You assumed tension, and so the encounter unfolded as you feared. On another occasion, you entered with confidence, expecting harmony, and harmony followed. Was this chance, or was it the law reflecting your state? Once you perceive this principle, you can never again call life unjust. Life is faithful to the seed you plant within. And yet, many resist this truth, preferring to blame fate, others, or circumstance. But the law does not bend to excuses. It responds only to assumption. If you would master life, you must master your inner state. You must ask yourself, what am I assuming right now? Are you assuming defeat or are you assuming victory? Are you assuming lack or abundance? Are you assuming rejection or love? Your answer determines your harvest. There is a tale of a young man who sought success in his work. He labored day and night, yet doors remained closed. His speech was ever, I have no chance, the world is against me. When he was told of the law, he began to change his words. Each night he affirmed within, I am already successful. Opportunities opened before me. He imagined letters of congratulation, the warmth of recognition, the satisfaction of achievement. Though nothing outwardly changed at first, he persisted. Soon, new connections came, a position opened, and his success became visible. His outer work was much the same, but his inner assumption transformed his world. Do not mistake persistence for strain. To persist in assumption is not to force, but to rest again and again in the inner end. When doubts arise, gently return to the vision. When appearances contradict, remind yourself the law is unfailing, the seed is already sown. As surely as the earth brings forth the blade, the stalk, and the corn, your assumption will bear fruit. Mark these words, the unseen is the cause, the seen is the effect, the unseen is your consciousness, clothed in assumption. The seen is the world that follows. If you wish to change the effect, change the cause. Stop chasing shadows, turn to the light within. And so, when desire rises in you, see it as the voice of life calling you to greater being. Do not question the possibility, for if it were not possible, you could not desire it. Accept it, assume it, and let the law fulfill it. Stand firm in your inner conviction, and soon the world will rearrange itself to reflect your faith. Close your eyes for a moment and consider what lies behind them. The world you see with your outer eyes is but a shadow. The true world, the creative world, is within. Every event, every fortune, every seeming accident begins in that inner realm of imagination. The vision you hold there, clothed in the feeling of reality, will one day become the very ground on which you walk. If you would master life, you must learn to dwell in that secret place where the wish fulfilled is already a living fact. To imagine is not idle daydreaming. It is the very act of creation. Scripture says, whatsoever things ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. Prayer then is not begging nor pleading. It is the inner vision of the desire already accomplished. It is seeing with the eyes of the heart what your natural eyes cannot yet behold. When you imagine with feeling, you are planting a seed in the fertile soil of consciousness, and the harvest must come. Many think imagination is a child's play, fit only for stories or idle fancy. Yet look around you, the chair upon which you sit, the building in which you dwell, the garments you wear, all began as ideas in imagination. Nothing exists in this outer world that was not first seen inwardly. If imagination can shape wood and stone, why should it not also shape circumstances, opportunities, health, and fortune? The only limit is the limit you place upon your own belief. Let me lead you into a simple exercise. Suppose you desire abundance. You could labor all day to calculate how money might come, or you could step into the inner treasury where all is already yours. Close your eyes and see yourself holding crisp notes of money, feeling their texture against your skin. Hear the sound of them being counted, the tone of a friend's voice saying, how fortunate you are. Allow the thrill of ownership to move through you, not as a future hope, but as a present possession. Dwell there until you feel it natural and then rest. This act, repeated in quiet confidence, is the true sowing. A woman once came to me who longed for a home of her own. She had lived for years in cramped quarters, convinced she could not afford more. When she learned the principle, she was told not to dwell on lack, but to imagine the end fulfilled. Each night before sleep, she walked through the rooms of her desired house in imagination. She touched the walls, opened the windows, looked into the garden, and felt the joy of calling it her own. Within months, through an inheritance she had never expected, the very kind of home she had envisioned became hers. The world called it coincidence. She knew it as fulfillment of vision. This is the power given to you to see before you see, to hear before you hear, to feel before you touch. And when you faithfully clothe yourself in the vision, the outer world cannot but yield to the inner decree. Yet many falter because they imagine without feeling. They picture their desire as though it were a painting on a distant wall, admired but unattainable. But the secret is to enter the scene, to lose yourself in it until it surrounds you like the air. If you wish health, do not merely see yourself healthy. Feel the vitality coursing through your limbs, the ease of movement, the delight of strength. If you wish companionship, do not merely picture a figure beside you. Feel the warmth of their hand, the joy of their laughter, the certainty of being cherished. It is the feeling that clothes the vision with life. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What is this substance but the felt reality of imagination? When you walk in the vision with conviction, you have the evidence before any outer proof appears. The world may call it folly, but soon it will call it fact. A young man once told me of his desire to succeed in his profession. He had struggled for years without recognition. I asked him, "Can you imagine receiving the very letter that tells you have been chosen, promoted, honored?" He began to practice nightly, lying upon his bed, holding in his hands an imaginary letter of congratulation. He unfolded it, read the words, heard the tone of his superior's voice, and felt the pride of accomplishment. He persisted until it became real to him. Within a short season, the very letter he had imagined arrived, word for word. His success was not won by striving, but by vision. Do not be deceived by appearances. The outer world is but a delayed echo of the inner. If you wish to change the echo, change the sound at its source. That source is imagination. You cannot expect new circumstances while rehearsing the same old visions. You cannot dwell nightly in failure and awaken to success. You must dare to see and feel the new state, even when nothing outward supports it. For in that daring lies creation. There is a story told of a poor laborer who dreamed of wealth. Each night, though he lay in a bare room, he closed his eyes and imagined himself in a fine house, clothed in rich garments, seated at a table filled with food. He felt the reality of it until sleep claimed him. His friends mocked him, saying he was a fool to waste time in dreams. Yet in time, through a chain of events no one could have foreseen, he inherited land that brought him great wealth. The vision he held inwardly shaped his destiny. What you accept in imagination will one day confront you in the outer world. This is the law. If you do not like what you now see, ask yourself, what have I been imagining? For the pictures you habitually paint inwardly are the patterns that life faithfully reproduces. Change the picture, and you change the world. This is why it is written, "When ye pray, believe that ye receive, and ye shall have." Prayer is not begging for a distant gift, it is assuming the feeling of the answered prayer now. To believe you receive is to step into the vision and claim it as already yours. Then, without strain, it must appear. Some ask, but what of obstacles? What of impossibilities? The vision has no regard for impossibility. Imagination is not limited by the calculations of reason. When you hold the end with faith, life itself rearranges to bring it forth. The sea parts, the walls fall, the way is made clear. Your task is not to design the means, but to assume the end. The means will follow of themselves. Let me give you an example. A man longed to travel abroad, but he had no money, no connections, no prospect of passage. Night after night, he imagined himself walking the streets of a foreign city, hearing the unfamiliar tongue, feeling the excitement of discovery. He did not concern himself with how he would get there. In time, a friend he had not seen for years contacted him with an invitation to join an expedition, all expenses paid. The vision had gone before him to prepare the way. And so I say to you, choose your vision wisely. Do not waste the sacred power of imagination on fear, doubt, or complaint. For every image, whether of joy or of sorrow, is a seed that must bear fruit. If you rehearse failure, you will reap failure. If you dwell in anxiety, you will meet anxious days. But if you clothe yourself in the vision of success, health, and peace, the world must yield it to you. Do you not see? Imagination is the workshop of eternity, and you are the craftsman. Life does not hand you circumstances at random, it reflects the visions you hold. This is why the prophet said, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Without vision, you drift upon the sea of chance. With vision, you command the winds. The exercise is simple but profound. Each night before sleep, enter the scene that would follow your fulfilled desire. If you long for wealth, imagine yourself spending freely, giving generously, rejoicing in plenty. If you long for healing, imagine yourself whole, active, vibrant. If you long for love, imagine yourself cherished, embraced, spoken to with tenderness. Let the vision be short, simple, and full of feeling. Repeat it until it feels natural. Then rest. In that rest, the seed is sown. Remember, it is not enough to say, "I wish." You must say inwardly, "I have." The wish looks forward, but the vision claims the end now. Do not imagine the process of receiving, but the result already obtained. Feel the celebration, the relief, the gratitude. That is the secret act. And as you practice, you will discover a curious thing. The vision begins to feel more real than the outer facts. The cramped room feels like a palace. The empty hand feels full. The solitary bed feels warmed by love. In that moment, you have crossed from wishing into faith. And faith, clothed in imagination, is the one power that never fails. The world is always giving you back the reflection of the state you occupy. Long before the facts appear in the outer world, the state has already been assumed within, and once it is assumed, the fact must follow. The outer picture is never the cause, it is the result, and the state in which you live inwardly is the true seed of every outward harvest. To recognize this is to hold the key to transforming every circumstance of life, for you will no longer battle with facts, but will quietly and deliberately change the state from which the facts flow. You may not yet realize how faithfully life mirrors your inner state. A man may think he is unlucky, that fortune always passes him by, and the world will show him endless confirmation of his belief. Another may hold within himself the quiet assurance that everything he touches prospers, and the world rushes to prove him right. The same events may pass through both men's lives, yet their experience differs because their states are different. It is written, "According to your faith be it unto you." Faith is not a fleeting thought, nor a passing wish. It is the sustained inner state in which you dwell. That state is the lawgiver of your world. There was once a man crushed by debt, hounded by creditors, and convinced he had reached the end of his means. Every night he reviewed his failures, rehearsing arguments, worrying over numbers, multiplying fears. And every morning, the world returned to him the very image of his inner rehearsal. Letters demanding payment, voices pressing him for money, opportunities closing before him. He lived in the state of lack, and lack was all he could see. One evening, he heard the simple truth that the state precedes the fact, that the way to change the outer world is to assume inwardly the end already accomplished. That night, for the first time, he closed his eyes not upon his debts, but upon the vision of freedom. He felt the joy of obligations lifted, the relief of open hands, the smile of a friend congratulating him on his fortune. He repeated this in silence until it seemed natural. In less than 2 months, unexpected funds arrived, debts were settled, and his outer life mirrored the state he had dared to occupy. Notice what happened. The facts of debt did not dissolve until the state of freedom was assumed. The outer did not change to persuade him of inner peace. Rather, he assumed inner peace until the outer bent to confirm it. This is the great reversal you must learn. Do not wait for the facts to give you permission to feel, but feel first, and the facts must follow. Take, for example, the one who desires love. If she continues to dwell in the state of loneliness, speaking to herself, "No one cares for me, I am always alone," she has clothed herself in the very garment of rejection, and the world will show her faces that ignore, voices that wound, silences that echo her belief. Yet if she closes her eyes each night and imagines the warmth of companionship, the comfort of being understood, the delight of a shared laughter, she has shifted her state. Though the outer world may still seem silent for a time, soon it cannot resist the command of the inner assumption, and love appears where before there was none. Do not think this is imagination only. It is law. Just as the seed contains within itself the pattern of the tree, so the state contains within itself the certainty of the fact. The farmer does not plant wheat and expect barley. He knows the seed determines the harvest. Likewise, you cannot dwell in poverty and reap abundance, nor in bitterness and reap joy. The state is the seed, the world is the harvest. Consider the parable of the prodigal son. He took his portion and wasted it in a far country until famine came. He longed to fill his belly with husks, yet no man gave to him. Then he came to himself and said, "How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger?" In that moment, he shifted state. He remembered abundance, he remembered his rightful place, and he rose to return. Long before he reached the house, the father saw him from afar, ran to him, and clothed him in robe and ring. What is this story but the eternal truth that when man returns in consciousness to the state of abundance, the facts of famine dissolve? The father, the robe, the feast, these are the facts that followed the state. Let me tell you of another man who sought success in business. He had labored for years with little recognition, convinced that others always had the advantage. His conversations were filled with complaint. "Nothing ever works out for me. They never choose me. Opportunities always pass me by." He was living in the state of rejection, and the world played back his lines with perfect accuracy. When he learned the principle, he began each night to imagine himself in possession of contracts, to hear his colleagues praising his work, to feel the thrill of achievement. At first it felt strange, for the facts contradicted his vision. But he persisted until it became natural. Soon, doors opened where none had been, and he found himself at the center of opportunities. Success did not create the state created success. This is the power you hold. You are free to choose your state, and in choosing, you choose your destiny. The outer world is clay in the hands of the potter, and the potter is your assumption. If you remain faithful to the new state, the clay must yield to the form. Do not be deceived by delay. The world is slow to change because it is dense, like the oak, slow to rise from the acorn. But the oak is already contained within the acorn. Likewise, the fact is already contained within the state. If you remain faithful, the harvest is certain. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. The world may appear unchanged for a season, but once the seed is planted and watered by feeling, the fact must break forth. A young woman once desired to become a singer. She was unknown, untrained, and fearful of criticism. Each time she thought of singing, she remembered her failures, and her fear silenced her. She was told, "Enter the state now. Imagine the applause, hear the audience, feel the joy of expression." Night after night she imagined herself bowing before a crowd, receiving flowers, hearing praise. She began to live in that state inwardly until it felt true. Outwardly, opportunities began to open, small at first, then larger. She was invited to sing for a gathering, then for a theater, until her dream became fact. The applause did not create her state created the applause. Notice how everything bends to the inner assumption. People, opportunities, even so-called accidents all conspire to bring forth the fact. This is why it is written, "All things are possible to him that believeth." For belief is nothing more than sustained assumption. When you believe, you are already living in the state of the fulfilled desire. Yet many sabotage their own harvest by wavering between states. One night they imagine abundance, the next they sink into worry. One day they affirm health, the next they rehearse sickness. The seed is planted and uprooted until no harvest appears. If you would see the fact, you must remain faithful to the state regardless of what the senses tell you. The senses will protest, the world will mock, but the law is sure. Hold the vision and the facts will bow. Think of Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers. Outwardly, every fact testified against his dream. He was cast into prison, forgotten, rejected. Yet inwardly he remained faithful to the vision of greatness. In time, the very chains became the path to the throne. His state preceded the fact, and the fact followed in ways no man could have devised. So too in your life. You may now see only walls, debts, loneliness, sickness. But what is the state you will assume? If you remain in the state of defeat, the facts will multiply to confirm it. If you shift to the state of victory, the facts will bend to your faith. The outer is clay, the inner is the mold. Do not wait for the facts to give you confidence. Do not say, I will feel wealthy when money comes. I will feel loved when another appears. I will feel healthy when symptoms vanish. You have reversed the order. You must feel first, and the facts will follow. Feel now the wealth, the love, the health, and the world will echo your song. I recall a man who longed for healing from an affliction that doctors had declared incurable. He lived daily in fear, rehearsing the verdict, accepting the state of sickness. Then he heard the truth that the state precedes the fact. He began nightly to imagine himself strong, to feel the joy of movement, to hear the voices of friends remarking on his recovery. He persisted until it felt natural. In time, his body responded and health returned. The world called it a miracle. He knew it as law. This principle does not fail. The state always precedes the fact. Your task is not to manipulate circumstances, nor to force the world, but to faithfully assume the end and dwell in it. Then, without effort, the facts must arrange themselves to reflect your assumption. And so I say to you, guard your state more than you guard your purse, for it is the true treasure house of life. Choose wisely where you dwell, for where you dwell inwardly, you will soon dwell outwardly. If you persist in fear, fear will clothe itself in fact. If you persist in hope, hope will bloom into sight. If you persist in fulfillment, fulfillment will stand before you. The law is certain, the state is sovereign, and the fact is its faithful servant. Every great fortune, every mighty achievement, every shift from obscurity into prominence began not with the outer world, but with the inner conviction of one who dared to see beyond appearances. The mind is the workshop in which all wealth is forged, and the thought process you entertain is the secret architect of your destiny. To alter the pattern of your thinking is to alter the course of your life, for thought is never idle, it is always creating. If you are to manifest great sums, if you are to summon vast wealth into your experience, you must first master the movement of your mind, directing it deliberately toward the end you seek, until the unseen becomes felt and the felt becomes fact. It is written, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. This does not mean that casual thoughts drifting across the surface of the mind shape your world. It means that the sustained, deep-rooted conviction that you secretly accept as true becomes the seed of your reality. A man may speak of riches all day long, yet if he secretly holds the belief that he is destined for struggle, that fortune is for others but never for him, then he has already decreed his poverty. But another may whisper little, saying nothing to the world of his intention, yet inwardly nurture the conviction that he is prosperous, successful, abundant. And though the outer facts may at first deny him, in time the world must bend to the state he holds within. Consider the case of a clerk in a small shop who longed for more. He dreamed of freedom, of wealth beyond his modest wages, but for years he continued to tell himself, "I cannot get ahead. I am limited by circumstance. Others are lucky, but I am not." Each thought, repeated night after night, clothed him in lack. One day he was told that his thought process alone determined his fortune, that by assuming the wealth he desired inwardly, the outer world must follow. At first he doubted, but he began an experiment. Each night he lay down imagining himself already in possession of vast riches. He felt the crispness of new bills, the ease of wealth, the freedom of spending without fear. He repeated to himself not words of poverty, but words of fulfillment until he began to believe them. Within a year, an opportunity came through what the world would call chance, and his fortunes multiplied beyond all expectation. Was it chance? No, it was law. The thought process became fact. This is why you must guard the inner conversations you have with yourself. Every idle word you mutter inwardly shapes the pattern of your life. If, when faced with bills, you say within, "This is too much, I cannot afford it," you are rehearsing poverty. If, when observing another's success, you say, "That will never be me, I will never have that," you are strengthening lack. But if you choose deliberately to answer with thoughts of wealth, "All things are mine, money flows to me freely, I live in abundance," you are rehearsing riches. In time, those inner rehearsals become outer realities. Think of a woman who desired to leave her small, confining life behind. She longed for travel, for homes in distant lands, for freedom to give generously. But each time she thought of wealth, she reminded herself of her small income, her limited prospects. She was told, "The secret is not in working harder, but in shifting the inner conversation. Begin to speak within as one already in possession of riches. Think as the wealthy think, feel as the wealthy feel, until it becomes natural." She obeyed. Night after night, she saw herself walking through homes by the sea, signing checks with ease, blessing others with gifts. At first, the world denied her, but she persisted until it became her reality. In time, her business flourished, new streams of income opened, and her life became the mirror of the state she had rehearsed within. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. It matters not where you stand outwardly, it matters only where you stand inwardly. A pauper with the consciousness of a king will not remain a pauper. A king with the consciousness of a pauper will not remain a king. The world reshuffles itself according to the sustained thought process you occupy. You may ask, "But how can thinking alone bring me 50 million? How can imagination produce what the world calls wealth?" The answer lies in the law of consciousness. The world is only a mirror. When you change your assumption, you change the reflection. The figure of 50 million is but a symbol, an image of abundance, a measure of freedom. If you persist in assuming it is yours, feeling the thrill of possessing it, speaking as one who already has it, then channels will open in ways your reason could never have devised. It may come through a business venture, an inheritance, a sudden opportunity, or what the world calls a coincidence. But the outer channel is of no importance. What matters is that the state, once assumed, compels the world to yield to it. I once knew a man who laughed when told he could attract great sums by changing his thought process. He scoffed, "Money is hard. Wealth belongs only to the privileged few." Yet those privileged few were men and women who had first believed it possible for them, who had dared to claim abundance inwardly before a single fact supported them. The man who laughed remained bound by his belief, struggling for years. Another who heard the same teaching chose to test it. He began to assume wealth was natural, to think of himself as prosperous, to walk the streets as though fortune already belonged to him. Within a short time, opportunities rose, investments multiplied, and he found himself living in the abundance he had dared to assume. The difference lay not in the world, but in the state each chose. It is written, "When you pray, believe that you have received, and it shall be yours." This is the heart of it. To believe you have received is to dwell in the thought process of fulfillment, to act and feel as though the thing longed for were already present. If you persist, the unseen must become seen. This is no idle promise. It is the unchanging law of life. Guard against the tendency to reason away the possibility. The mind will argue, but I do not yet see it. The numbers do not add up. The facts are against me. Yet the facts you see today are the fruits of yesterday's thoughts. If you wish to alter tomorrow's facts, you must alter today's thought process. To focus upon the current lack is to plant more lack. To persist in the vision of abundance is to plant abundance. You cannot reap what you do not sow. A young student once desired a scholarship, but had no means of securing it. He was told, "Think of yourself as one already chosen. See the letter in your hand. Hear the voice congratulating you." He did so night after night until the thought became natural. In due time, a letter arrived. He was awarded a scholarship greater than he had imagined. Was it coincidence? No, it was the law at work. The thought process had ripened into fact. If such power can bring a scholarship, can it not also bring vast wealth? The process is the same, only the measure differs. You are not asked to figure out how the 50 million will come, but only to assume it is already yours and to sustain that state until the world yields. The how belongs to the unseen intelligence that shapes all things. Your task is only to persist in the end. Think of a farmer. He plants seed and goes about his day. He does not dig up the ground each morning to see if the plant is sprouting. He knows that once the seed is planted and watered, growth is inevitable. So, too with your thought process. Plant the seed of abundance by assuming it now. Water it daily with feeling and inner conversation. Do not uproot it with doubt. In time, the harvest must appear. Even when the world seems silent, even when nothing appears to change, remain faithful. The silence of the soil is not the absence of growth, but the hidden work of roots. So it is with the unseen movement of your assumption. Beneath the surface, things are shifting, channels are opening, doors are aligning. The day will come when the sprout breaks through, and the fact stands before you. I recall a story of a man who lost everything in business. He sat among the ruins of his life, convinced all was over. Then he heard that the key was not to dwell upon failure, but to assume success. Each night he rebuilt inwardly what he had lost, imagining contracts signed, banks opened, wealth restored. At first he mocked himself, but he persisted until it became real to him. Within a short time, opportunities arose, and he rebuilt his fortune greater than before. The world called it resilience, luck, timing. He knew it was the law of assumption. The thought process became the fact. The figure of 50 million may seem vast to the mind, but to consciousness there is no measure. To the infinite, there is no great or small, no easy or hard. The same process that brings a coin brings a kingdom. The limitation lies only in your belief. If you persist in the small, you reap the small. If you dare to claim the great, you reap the great. Your thought process is the only true measure of what you will experience. So I ask, what are you entertaining within? Do you daily rehearse lack, speaking to yourself of debts, of fears, of impossibility? Or do you deliberately dwell in riches, conversing with yourself as one already wealthy? The choice is yours, and the result is inevitable. The thought process will always become the fact. It is not effort, nor strain, nor endless labor that brings the great harvest. It is the simple act of assuming the end and persisting in it. The world will tell you wealth is scarce, that only a few may attain it, that luck or privilege decides. But you are not bound by the world's verdict. You are bound only by your own assumption. Choose now to assume abundance, to think and feel as though you already possess it, and in time the world must reflect it. For the state always precedes the fact. The thought process is the true foundation of every fortune. And as you choose to dwell inwardly in the wealth you desire, you have already set in motion the unseen forces that will bring it forth into sight. Beloved, Let us draw nearer to the heart of this mystery. We have spoken of the seed of assumption, of the vision formed within, and of the inner law that governs all appearances. Yet tonight, I would lead you into the most sacred act of all, the stillness wherein you rest, not striving, not pleading, but yielding wholly to the state of fulfillment. For this is the mystical closing, the holy pause between desire and manifestation, where nothing is done outwardly, and yet everything is accomplished within. Here, in silence, you commune with the invisible. Here, you take possession, not by labor or effort, but by surrendering to the assurance that it is already finished. Consider the words spoken in the Psalms, "Be still, and know that I am God." What is it to be still? It is not the mere quieting of the body, though that may accompany it. It is the silencing of doubt, the ceasing of all frantic effort, the laying aside of every anxious hand that would grasp or clutch. To be still is to rest inwardly in the conviction of already being what you long to be. To know is to accept it without question. And when you allow yourself to rest in that knowing, the work is done, though the outer world may not yet reflect it. For the outer lags behind the inner, the fact follows the state. Many of you attempt to hasten your harvest by continual striving. You repeat, you plead, you analyze, you struggle with shadows, believing that your effort will force the manifestation. But the law is not fulfilled by strain. The law is fulfilled by assumption. An assumption is sustained in stillness, not in restlessness. When the farmer plants his seed, does he scratch at the soil day after day to see whether the shoot has broken? No, he trusts the unseen process, and in his patience, the invisible work becomes visible. Likewise, you plant your desire in imagination, and then you let it rest in the soil of your consciousness. The more you worry, the more you disturb its roots. But the moment you allow yourself to rest in the assurance of its already being, you will find the harvest begins to rise without your anxious interference. Let us turn to a living illustration. I knew of a man once who had lost nearly all. His business failed, his family left him, and he found himself destitute. He sought counsel, expecting a method, a technique, perhaps some outer opportunity. Instead, he was told only this: go into your room, close your door, and be still. Imagine yourself already restored. Do not try to figure out the how. Rest in the knowing that it is done. He resisted, for he believed action alone could rescue him. Yet when all other efforts failed, he surrendered. Night after night, he lay upon his bed, and in stillness, he heard within himself the congratulations of friends, the laughter of family, the words of one saying, "How wonderfully you have recovered." He did not strive, he simply rested in that hearing until it felt real. Within weeks, opportunities arose that he could not have devised. An old acquaintance sought him out. A forgotten debt was repaid, and from ruin he was lifted into restoration. He did nothing outwardly to produce these events. He simply became still and assumed his desire had already blossomed. You see, the act of faith is not clinging desperately, but letting go. It is not an anxious holding, but a restful knowing. Faith says, though I see it not with my eyes, I possess it within me already. Faith closes its eyes to the evidence of lack and opens its inner ear to the song of fulfillment. When faith rests, the unseen begins to arrange itself with precision beyond your calculation. And when you awaken tomorrow, you will find the path has been cleared, the doors have been opened, the stones have been rolled away, and yet you will not know how it was done, for the how is never your concern. Let us enter this hour, here, in this moment. Close your eyes, if you will, breathe softly and let the body grow quiet. Do not strain, do not force. Simply imagine yourself at the end of your journey, having already received that which your heart longs for. Hear someone dear to you speaking the words that would be true if you had succeeded. Feel the warmth of their hand, the smile upon their lips. Sense the environment about you. Where would you be if this were true? What would you see? What would you hear? What would you touch? Let it all rise gently, as though a dream were weaving itself through your mind. And then do nothing. Rest in it. Let it be. The power lies not in the multitude of repetitions, nor in the fever of effort, but in the quiet conviction that it is already yours. You need not shout to the heavens, for the heaven you seek is within. You need not beg for an answer, for the answer is already planted in the soil of your being. Simply receive it in stillness. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that your inner word is the creative power. Be still and know that the end is secure. Think of the master asleep in the storm. The waves rose high, the winds howled, the disciples trembled in fear. Yet he lay asleep in perfect peace, for he knew the storm was powerless before the stillness of his inner assurance. And when he rose, he spoke a word, and the winds obeyed. That same pattern is true for you. The storms of life may rage, the bills may pile high, the body may ache, the world may mock your vision. Yet if within you there is stillness, a quiet knowing of your fulfilled desire, then you shall rise and speak, and the storm will bow. But you must first be still. Another man, wishing for a home of his own, nightly entered the silence before sleep. He did not beg for money, nor did he scheme about loans. Instead, he lay still and walked through the rooms of the house in imagination. He touched the walls, he opened the windows, he felt the floor beneath his feet. He did not do this in strain, but in rest, like one revisiting a memory. Weeks later, he was led to a property unexpectedly, and through means no reasoning could have devised, the home became his. He had done nothing but rest in stillness and accept his desire as already true. When you close your eyes this night, take no concern for the morrow. Do not ask, will this come? When shall it appear? How shall it be? These are questions of doubt, and doubt is the disturber of stillness. Instead, close your eyes and rest in the vision already accomplished. Whisper not to heaven for permission, but dwell as one who has received. When you rest in this assurance, you release the invisible forces to work on your behalf, and you will awaken to find that what you once longed for is now woven into the tapestry of your days. And so, the mystical closing is not an end but a beginning. It is not a shutting down, but an opening up. It is not the labor of man, but the gift of God within man. It is the holy Sabbath of the soul, the rest wherein all is already accomplished. For the scripture declares, and God rested on the seventh day from all his works. What is this rest, if not the stillness of knowing the work is finished? When you enter that rest, you too declare the end from the beginning. You too cease from striving and stand in the certainty that your desire is already complete. Therefore, let the silence of the night be your temple. Lay down your burdens there. Let go of every anxious thought, every restless hand. Close the door and in secret assume the joy of fulfillment. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you openly. For in stillness you take hold of the eternal truth, that your desire is already yours, and nothing can prevent its appearance but your own disbelief. So, tonight, let disbelief die, and let stillness live. Rest and know. Rest and receive. Rest and let it be. All that has been shared leads to this living truth. Your world is nothing more than the outpicturing of your own inner state. Every condition, every circumstance, every joy or sorrow you meet upon the path is but the shadow cast by the image you hold within. To transform the outer, you need only transform the inner. To change the harvest, you need only change the seed. Desire is not placed in your heart as a mockery, but as a promise of its fulfillment, for the very presence of the longing is proof that its reality already exists. You are never asked to toil outwardly to make it happen, but to rest inwardly in the assurance that it is already so. Imagination is the womb of all creation, faith is the bridge, and stillness is the seal. When you dare to assume the end, when you clothe yourself in the feeling of your fulfilled desire, when you walk in silence as though it were already given, the world cannot withhold it from you. The unseen must become seen, the invisible must take form, for that is the